take the politics out of it. Capitol Police are not villains. They were police officers who chose a profession. We have just got to recognize the humanity and the challenges that law enforcement have in this country and strip the damn politics from it. Patrick Yoes, thank you so much for taking the time. The National Fraternal Order of Police, where Patrick Yoes is the head of it, reported on December 31st that 347 officers were shot in the line of duty in 2025. That is up from 2024. The highest year, it seems, in recently was 2023. But the numbers are up. For example, in 2020, there were 312 who were shot. So we're now talking about 347 police officers shot and 45 of them killed. And, I know this is a big ask, but you can go online and find the report. And part of what makes the report so impactful that the Fraternal Order of Police have put out are the pictures and summaries of each of these officers who've died, all right? It reminds us who these people were. You can't just think of them as, 45 cops were killed. That's true. 45 people lost their lives. 45 families were devastated. And I recommend that if you care about this stuff, that you go look at all the pictures that they have in their report, which is publicly available online, because it's heartbreaking. And you look at, they actually created a state-by-state breakdown. And I guess, Patrick Yoes, I'm particularly surprised when I saw that 47 were in Texas. I mean, so many more in Texas than in any other state. Is there any possible explanation for that?
No, I think part of that has to be just the geographics of Texas. It is such a large state, very rural in a lot of spots, a lot of locations. So I think that the geographic probably plays a part in that.
Yeah. Ambush-style attacks is something that you mentioned in the report. Talk to us about that.
Well, if I could, I'd go a little bit. I want to tell you our motivation of why we started collecting.
Please.
In 2000, prior to 2018, we knew that this trend was existing. But believe it or not, there's so much statistics we keep in this country, but there was never any statistics kept on the amount of officers that were shot in the line of duty.
That is wait. I got to stop you there. That is shocking.
Yeah.
There were no statistics before. What did you say? 2018?
2018 is when we started collecting. Well, late 2017 we started. 2018 we have a full year. So in 2018 we started collecting this data.
That's the first year that people. Wow.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I'm sorry.
So we started tracking this data because we knew that there was a concern here. We could tell it. We could feel it every day. It's our members that are impacted by it, but it wasn't telling a full story because you didn't have the statistics to show it. So we started tracking this data. 2 years later, 2019. We ended up getting a grant from the Department of Justice where we track this data, and that's the data that is used by the Department of Justice to put their notifications out on officers shot in the line of duty. So here's the thing, and what does the story tell us? It's pretty shocking. Since 2018, there have been 2,580 officers that have been shot, 417 have been killed. And I'll argue with you that if this was any other profession, we would be stepping up and recognize we have an epidemic in this country, and we need to take some action to fix what is broken. But whenever we have discussions on it, it turns into a political dialogue that clouds the image. We recently had a hearing in Department of Homeland Security, the Homeland Security Committee. Chairman Garabino called a hearing, and it was all about the rhetoric that was causing attacks on law enforcement. Instead of talking about this real issue, instead of talking about the 2,580 officers who were shot or the 417 that were killed, we spent more time talking about politics and who was responsible for it. Well, I will argue with you that the responsibility is spread across all against multiple administrations, 6 total. And if we look at those numbers, we will see that everybody owns this, and they also own the responsibility of fixing it as well.
Well, let me ask you about that. Talking to Patrick Yoes, National President of the Fraternal Order of Police, about a report they put out at the end of the year about the number of officers shot and killed in the line of duty. And I've been making the point that it should upset all of us. But you say that we should take action, right? And, I find myself saying that sometimes too. And then I'm asked, well, what specifically do you mean by that? And my response is always, kind of bigger picture societal, right? Which is, let's respect our cops. Let's thank our cops. Let's appreciate our cops. Is that the sort of take action that you're talking about?
So I think there are multiple steps here. First, you're right. Absolutely. We need to recognize that the rhetoric that exists is not helping. The dehumanization of law enforcement. And I think ICE is a perfect example. There's not a single law enforcement officer that I know of that made the laws that they enforce.
Yeah. That's the point I was making before.
Yeah,
they got assigned to this. Yeah.
Right. So we're enforcing laws that are made by Congress. And rather than recognize that if you don't like the law, you need to change it in Congress, you want to attack the very people who were out there doing a job that they have an obligation to carry out. So rather than demonizing law enforcement, why don't we focus on the issues and stop attacking law enforcement officers for simply doing the job that they're doing? Look, I don't want to turn this into political. I don't, but I think this is just a general rule. Law enforcement needs to support law enforcement. If we were focusing on trying to help, in Minneapolis would be a good example. If Minneapolis was engaged in assisting to enforce the laws that exist, we wouldn't see all of this unrest that exists there and this atmosphere that creates dehumanization of law enforcement. I think that's just one example that's duplicated throughout this country. When public officials recognize that you can't throw fuel on a fire and curse the flames you create, there's consequences for it. Our law enforcement officers in this country, the ones who, some 800,000 that show up every single day and make a difference in the communities they serve,
Yep.
They're the ones that are paying the price for this. They didn't sign up for this. They didn't enforce, they didn't enact the laws. They're just tasked with the responsibility of enforcing them. So the first step is we as a society need to recognize the importance of law enforcement, the role it plays in the quality of life that we have within our communities, and recognize that it's not just a law enforcement officer responsibility. We all play a huge part in the protection of our communities. The second one is, and this is the one that I was testifying before Congress for, we really need for Congress to pass the Protect and Serve Act. What the Protect and Serve Act says is that if someone attacks a law enforcement officer, it will be recognized as an attack on society. And as a result, the federal government can bring charges on those individuals. So when states or local jurisdictions choose that they are not going to hold people accountable, at least the federal government will have a tool in its toolbox in order to be able to send a message that we are not going to allow violence towards law enforcement officers. That would be a huge boost for the men and women who put on a badge every day and go out and protect our streets, showing that they're supported by the people that that are in leadership roles.
And let me ask you this. I'm just interested in that. Where does that stand? Is that expected to? Do you have any sense of where it is?
In 2018, I think it was 2018, it passed the House without with very few. I mean, a very small percentage of no votes, and then it failed because the Senate did not act on it by the end of the Congress. Since then, we have not had any success in moving this bill forward. It is introduced in the House. I'm not sure if it's introduced in the Senate side yet, but this is one we considered our top priority because in reality, and I say this and I mean no disrespect to any other profession, but if we had a cave mine at a cave in at a coal mine, we would have hearings about occupational safety.
I agree.
Law enforcement officers, I'm giving you quantitative data to show you that 2,580 officers have been shot, 417 killed. And we can't even get anyone to accept it. Look, some will argue that if you're a law enforcement officer, you do what you signed up for. Well, I can tell you, I never signed up in my 36 years of law enforcement. Never did I sign up thinking that I'm going to go to work because I want to be shot. No, I want to protect my communities. And every other officer who does this, they do it because that's what they believe in. They want to make a difference. And there should be some support as well, recognizing that there's an epidemic here. We need to do something about it.
Even if it's a dangerous job, which it is and it can be, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be absolutely furious about the report that you have put out. And that's the point. And again, I'm just going to encourage everyone, please go look at the bios of the cops who've been killed. These are, it'll get you. It'll remind you. Let me ask you one. Sorry.
These officers that showed up to work, they went to work to do their job in their communities.
Left their kids and their families at home, and then
that's it. They did not return at the end of their shift.
All right, let me ask you one other, and I don't intend for it to be politically charged, but it is a little bit politically charged. I know that you guys had put out a statement criticizing the pardons of all the Capitol police officers. I believe you did. And there's been a new page put out on the January 6th website from the White House that blames the Capitol Police for January 6th. It says Capitol Police aggressively fire tear gas, flashbangs, and rubber munitions into crowds of peaceful protesters, injuring many and deliberately escalating tensions. Video evidence shows officers inexplicably removing barricades, opening Capitol doors, and even waving attendees inside the building, actions that facilitated entry while simultaneously deploying violent force against others. These inconsistent and provocative tactics turned a peaceful demonstration into chaos. I would assume that you don't support that kind of language, right?
And back within a 1 week period, President Biden, on his way out the door, pardoned cop killers and commuted sentences to cop killers, followed by the President Trump coming in and pardoning January 6th. The Fraternal Order of Police and International Association of Chiefs of Police did a joint statement recognizing the power of the president to give pardons, but also recognize that an attack on law enforcement officers is an attack on our community. It's an attack on society, and therefore we strongly feel that anyone who attacks a law enforcement officer should serve the full term of which they were sentenced. So I'll leave it at that. I think that's the important thing here. You're asking law enforcement officers to do a job. Whether or not someone in a leadership role made a decision to do something, I don't know. I'm not here to judge that, but I will tell you that in my opinion, the officers who worked January 6th at the Capitol and defended both Capitol Police and for the Metropolitan Police Department were there defending the Capitol and our heroes, in my opinion.
It's the same thing that I keep saying, which is take the politics out of it. Capitol Police are not villains. They were police officers who chose a profession. The ICE officers who are there are officers who are doing a job and are executing on what higher-ups are telling them to do. And we have just got to recognize the humanity and the challenges that law enforcement have in this country and strip the damn politics from it. And I am again, and you and I have not talked enough for you to know what I say on a regular basis, but I think you probably get the idea, which is that I was furious about this Capitol Police stuff. But I also get furious when I think cops are being tried based on political pressure as opposed to the evidence. And it seems like it's not that hard to be intellectually consistent in this regard, to simply say, I'm pro-law enforcement, all right? That's where I come out. Does that mean every cop? No! Bad cops are a scourge for the worst thing that happened to good cops. Every cop will tell you that. But this shouldn't be so hard for people.